Hi everyone. Today I'd like to talk about the book Authority, the second in the Southern Reach trilogy. It follows the first book, Annihilation. Annihilation was, in my opinion, a great movie, and after a little casual reading about the books, I realized the books were a bit of a different beast to the movie, so I wanted to give them a go. The prospect of reading a book which really embraces the Lovecraftian idea of something being indescribable, but something the characters also actively grapple with, really appealed to me. While it's not the topic of this video, I think it's an aspect of the books that are done really well. Every time they try and explain Area X, all of their explanations come up short and they know it, and it's that aspect of the unknowableness that led me to look and open up the story fully. So, after finishing reading Annihilation, I approached Authority with an open mind, but a little wary, knowing that a lot of the people didn't like the book, or at least didn't like the book as much as they liked Annihilation. Throughout the book, I have to admit, I felt a little lost. I recognized the through line of the book. John Control Rodriguez is now the new director of Southern Reach, and we follow him as he enters into his new role, and his investigation into what Area X is, but also what the Southern Reach's activity has been. Beyond that, however, I started looking for what the book was about. About in that, how does this book contribute to the overall plot of the three books? I leapt from one single point to another, thinking that the book had one single focus. So in this video, I'd like to look at each of these single things I focused on, but then discuss what the book is more actually about. So some disclaimers first. For this video, please assume spoilers for the entire Southern Reach trilogy, as well as the movie. What I thought Authority was about. I went into Authority with the wrong idea. At the end of the book Annihilation, we know that there is a doppelganger of the biologist, and that it is the doppelganger who has gone back to the Southern Reach, instead of the biologist. We're primed for this, and I was primed for this too. The beginning of the novel focusing on Control interrogating the biologist, or Ghost Bird, and narrowly saving her from the clutches of Central, stood out to me as a focal point. This, I thought, is what it's all about. The biologist is the through line that holds the story together. She's the center of the story, and we come to learn all about the different characters, places, and entities by ultimately following some form of the biologist, be it her original self or Ghostbird. I thought that the book would, in essence, continue that thread of Area X, opened up in Annihilation, but internally somehow. We would go back to Area X in some form or another. My first mistake was thinking that the focal point of the story to be Area X as a locked-in, static, physical location that could not move, and that we would follow its investigation with the biologist exclusively. Of course, I was wrong. The story dropped the biologist and focused more on Control, who he is and his life. It also focused a lot on the office of the Southern Reach, the people who worked there, and their internal office politics. That's where I formed my second impression of the novel. Okay, so now we're talking about the office politics. I thought the novel must be setting itself up to make commentary about how there can be impending environmental disasters right in front of us, and we can squander our time bickering about it, in a kind of don't look up style, although this book came first. As though Area X was an analogy for climate change, and Central and Southern Reach are the big businesses just fucking about rather than doing what's necessary to contain the problem. Authority isn't about that either. Well, you could argue that everything I've brought up so far are subplots of the book, an aspect of the world and its world building that we get to experience. But no matter how Vandermeer depicted the office politics, the conclusion at the end of the book would have, or should have, still happened. But before talking about the ending, I want to explore the office politics for a moment, because it was the main false lead I was hooked on. Office politics, grace. The introduction of Grace as a character really stuck out to me. She was, from my naive reading, presented as the antagonist, the big bad. She was the barrier between Control and his objective. There were scenes that made themselves as plot beats of each day of Control's time at the Southern Reach. A few in particular, like Grace sending the other doppelgangers back to Central without Control's permission, Grace putting up huge barriers in his work with the Southern Reach, when she said, "Then in that case, John Rodriguez, I have no comment on your recommendations, other than that I will begin to implement them in as excruciatingly slow fashion as possible." Then the cafeteria confrontation, one of the climaxes of the story. Since Grace is really the most direct and explicit form of hostility in the novel, it made the most sense to me to see her as the antagonist. Sure, Area X was ultimately the antagonist, if you could really fully consider it one, but at the time it was passive and almost benign, a backdrop to a different kind of conflict in the office itself. Office politics, more broadly speaking, dominated much of the story, more than just inside the Southern Reach. Each character we met had their own opinion about Area X. Each of them had their own ideas and space on the stage to talk about how Area X could be poked or prodded, or what it is. They were all trying to get something, even if that was to be sedentary and just have a job somewhere. But the real tension in office politics was the tension between the Southern Reach, Central, and Lowry. Lowry was and is somewhat shrouded in mystery. We're never fully let in on what Lowry's plans and machinations are. We're never filled in on why or how he has so much money and connections and power within Central, except the assumption that he just gets a lot of funding from them, maybe even as much or more than the Southern Reach, considering the extent of his own facility. Central, on the other hand, are a vague, amorphous blob of expectations, represented only or at best by Severance, who also happens to be in league with Lowry. We never really meet anyone from Central. We never really learn anything about them. The most we get are lots and lots and lots of whispers, which Control tries to form into some kind of idea or understanding of what's really going on. Overall, we see that the Southern Reach wants to do more to learn about Area X. We also see Lowry imposing his own demands on the Southern Reach. For example, using hypnosis on people and attempting to make Area X react by sending those people with specific psychological profiles into Area X, which indicates to us that he knows more about Area X than we do. Central also increasingly takes away funding from Southern Reach. From the outset of the novel, we are told that certain kinds of repairs and work can only be achieved through contact with Central and the army base nearby. That is how limited the Southern Reach is in its autonomy. Central increasingly treats the situation with Area X as a military situation too, despite decades of relative inactivity from it. The book continues to shift focus as you go through reading it. The office politics remained a constant throughout the story, but then there were long stretches of the book devoted to Control's life after work too. I could really keep going about all the different shifts in focus. There's a lot in the book, and I haven't even touched on Control copying the director, going to the bar pretending to be someone he isn't, or Control's evening runs, or his cat Chori, or the conversations with the voice after work. There's also Cheney, or the lore about the Southern Reach's experiments on Area X, the videos that they have, the samples they've taken. And every time I read a shift in the focus of the story, I reoriented myself. Maybe it's about the voice. Maybe it's a slice of life style novel. Maybe there's something in the lore that will make itself pronounced and important. At this point, I was almost done with the book, jumping from individual point to individual point. I just gave up and decided to continue to go along for the ride. What authority actually was. Everything I had tried to cobble together in the story amounted to the following statement. This is why Area X has been allowed to fester and grow, because behind the scenes, the people running the investigation are consumed by arguments and internal politics with each other, consumed so much that they will be wholly unprepared when Area X makes its move. You know, when you phrase it like that, I wasn't too far off the plot. In an interview, Vandermeer stated that if Annihilation is an expedition into Area X, then Authority is an expedition into the Southern Reach, the agency sending in the expeditions. So me, in my own blurb, saying that Authority was about the forces behind Area X's investigation, lines up with the blurb that Vandermeer gives too. Authority fooled me. It led me into a place where I thought that the focus of the novel was just on one thing. And my mistake was thinking that Authority was any one of these things in isolation. Instead, the novel was a kaleidoscope, a mosaic of different disparate pieces, all in conflict with each other and themselves. What this mosaic provided us, the reader, with was a sense of understanding, and maybe even a sense of closure to the situation we're presented with. There's so many reasonable questions we could have raised about the Southern Reach while reading Annihilation. Who are the Southern Reach exactly? Why have they taken the approaches they have towards the expeditions? Why can't they do this, or why haven't they done that? What are the constraints and limitations that Area X places upon its own investigation? These questions are all answered in great depth throughout the story. We get more than just answers to these questions. We gain an understanding of why the situation in Area X is the way it is. We gain a feeling of the composition of the situation, who is involved and in what capacity. We are set up to explore this further through Saul and the director's subplots in Acceptance. Conclusion. Authority lured me into the maze of bureaucracy and office politics, and I got lost in there. It is a maze, after all. Everyone has their own theories about Area X, and each staff member is given space to comment in some capacity about it too. Then there's all the other red tape and bureaucracy that Control deals with. He struggles to get his hands on information about expeditions, information about other people. Everything is a mess. Then there's the adversarial relationships between Grace and Control, the whispers of factions in Central, there's Severance, Lowry, and it just keeps going, infinitely untangling like a man-made fractal of bureaucracy. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the books below, as well as your experience with them. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, as I'm going to continue to try making videos and learning how YouTube works. Thank you, and see you next time.